Resuming debate, the honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So today is December the 3rd, and here we are discussing the privilege motion regarding the submission of documents to Parliament. Again, we shouldn't be discussing or debating this motion. We shouldn't have been debating it. We shouldn't be debating it today. We shouldn't be debating it this week, last week.
A point of order from the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
I just want to congratulate the member on being the 215th speaker to this.
It is not a point of order, and I would the honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Yes. So we shouldn't be debating this. We shouldn't have been debating it for the past 6 or 7 weeks since July. It's not July. Well, it seems like July, but September the 26th. And why shouldn't we be debating this debate? Because the Liberals should have released the information regarding the Green Slush Fund weeks and weeks ago. As requested, should have given it to the RCMP and to Parliament. But the Liberals, as is typical of them, they're just snubbing their nose at Parliament. It's a lack of respect for this institution, for the Canadian people, because this is the People's House. Now, the Liberals, they blame the Conservatives. It's our fault for keeping on speaking about this issue. The fact of the matter is, it's the Speaker who made this ruling. Liberal, well, he's supposed to be nonpartisan, Speaker that made this ruling. And this isn't just a regular Liberal that became Speaker, but he was the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. So, pretty close. And he has ruled on this privilege motion. That's why we're here. They should take it up with the Speaker. The Liberals, they had their backup with the previous Speaker, who was a Liberal member of Parliament representing Nipissing Temiskaming, and they were quite happy to get rid of him, even though he was on their side, elected as a Liberal. And why? Because in the last Parliament...
I have another point of order from the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
This is actually really a point of order. Madam Speaker, the member just said he just referred to the Speaker and said the Speaker was on their side. One of the tried and true parts of this House is that the Speaker is impartial. Speaking negatively or implying motive of the Speaker.
The honourable member's point, and I was just actually consulting on the matter, and it is true that speakers are meant to be impartial. There are no sides; they rule. That's it. That's all. And so I would ask members to respect that. Thank you,
Madam Speaker. I did not attack the Speaker. Even.
Saying the Speaker is on one side or the other, and that
Point of order.
before members now rise to make points of order, before you rise to make a point of order, I would like you to refer to the exact order, that standing order that your member is referring to, because this is getting very disruptive. The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge is trying to make a speech, and I would like to know exactly which point of order the honourable members are referring to before rising on a point of order.
The insinuation. All members vote individually, privately for the Speaker, including the Conservatives. So they are part of this.
I have addressed the issue. We should not be referring to the speakership as being partial or impartial. The speakership is impartial by nature. So I would just remind the honourable member to not refer to the speaker as taking sides. The honourable speaker does not take sides. And I would like him to retract that comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I retract that comment. but if you don't mind me saying, the speaker, whatever the speaker is, will normally be a member from the party that is in government, so whether you're conservative or liberal. So it's not a matter of being partisan. It's not a matter of being partisan. It's just a matter of that is the case. So I don't see, I don't see this, I'm just mentioning where my thoughts were. So if I'll continue.
Not about partisanship, and I think the ruling has been made. I would like us to move on, and the honourable member can continue his speech, but not make references to the speakership.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I hope my time will be adjusted. Pardon me?
Give the honourable member 2 more minutes, yes.
About a minute, so thank you. So in the last Parliament, we found ourselves in a similar situation. Documents were to be presented to the Parliament. But the Liberals said, no, we can't have transparency. So the Speaker made a judgment, and he ordered documents to be produced unredacted. Sounds like it's a repeat. The Prime Minister and all those that were surrounding him decided to take this speaker, the previous speaker, where to? To court. To do what? To sue him? Who knows what? Throw the keys? Forget about him? Not sure. Madam Speaker, I'd like to read an article from the Globe and Mail on June the 23rd, 2021, by Robert Fife and Stephen Chase. It is not, I'm not reading the whole article, but just excerpts from it. So this is what it says. The Liberal government is taking the House of Commons Speaker to court. That's in an unprecedented move to prevent the release of uncensored documents. Sounds like today. To members of Parliament that offer insight into the firing of 2 scientists from Canada's top infectious disease laboratory. The government said in a court filing that the disclosure of this information could not only jeopardize national security, but also possibly Canada's international relations. It's more like their political fortunes. I'm adding that. The legal challenge against a ruling of the House stunned opposition MPs. An order of the House, backed by a majority of MPs, called on the Public Health Agency to produce records it had been withholding from a Commons committee for months. The Speaker called the court action an urgent matter and vowed to vigorously fight for government. Fight the government, saying that the House of Commons law clerk Philippe Dufresne will prepare a legal defense. He says, the former Speaker, the Speaker's office will defend the rights of this House. That is something I take seriously, he said. The legal system does not have jurisdiction over the operations of the House. We are our own jurisdiction. That is something we will fight tooth and nail to protect, and we will continue to do that. Mr. Dufresne, again the law clerk, told MPs before a Commons committee that to his knowledge that Canadian governments has never been gone before the court to try and elude an order from the House of Commons to produce documents. Now, Canada is 157 years old. This was, I guess we're looking at about 3 years ago, so it was 154 years old. It had never been ordered to produce documents. They had never seen this. He said, the House has exclusive authority when it comes to matters that fall under parliamentary privilege. For months, opposition MPs have been seeking, again, this is the article from Globe and Mail, have been seeking unredacted records from the Public Health Agency of Canada that explain why Xiang Qi and her husband Qiding Chang, pronunciation is, I'm sure, faulty, were fired from the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg. The two scientists lost their security clearances, and the RCMP was called to investigate in July 2019. They were dismissed in January the following year. More than 250 pages of records have been withheld in their entirety, and hundreds of others have been partially censored before being provided to MPs. Well, we've had the same thing here with this in 2024. Oh, the Liberals will say, yeah, well, we produced the documents. They've used up all the ink in the printer because they blacked out most of it. So they haven't revealed. They've actually mocked Parliament. So they also relate to the March 2019 transfer of deadly virus samples to the Wuhan Institute of Virology that was overseen by Dr. Q. Interesting. Wuhan, does that remind you of any place? It should. It's where the COVID virus began, or not the virus, but the COVID began. They closed down in China. MPs have put safeguards that require Commons Law Clerk to review the documents and redact information that would cause national security questions or criminal investigation before making them public. Former House of Commons Law Clerk Rob Walsh said that the federal court should deny the Liberal government request. Here's what happened, Madam Speaker, is that they did not want scrutiny into this lab scandal. Exactly. These were Chinese spies. Okay? It showed the connection of Canada, China, the Wuhan lab, and the worldwide pandemic. Now, that would really not be good for the Liberals' political fortune, because they had spent hundreds of billions of dollars on COVID per se, and we're going to actually see how much of that actually was lining their own pockets and the pockets of those that were close to them, and just a total disaster. And the fact of the matter is, even though Canada's debt was doubled during this time, just as much debt had been added during this short period of time, past few years under the Liberals, that has been added for all throughout Canadian history. It's a shame. So the thing is, giving out all this money with very little accountability, it would all go to naught, because they were basically, in many respects, there were some things we supported as far as Conservatives, but in many respects it was poorly managed, and it was politically driven. I would have to make, that's my interpretation. They said it was for COVID supports, but now the Auditor General has just released, I think last week, that the Prime Minister's CEBA program was just another $1 billion disaster during the COVID period. $3.5 billion in taxpayers' money was paid to almost 80,000 recipients who didn't meet eligibility requirements. And I know they wanted to really hurry and get it out, but it was just a disaster. The Auditor General also found that the Liberal Minister of Finance did not provide effective oversight for the CEBA program, and billions of dollars was being given to people there was 4 people that had lost unemployment, to people that were incarcerated, that were students, high school students, that were addicts on social assistance, and actually this exacerbated the addiction crises. So what did the Liberals do? This is 2021. Because they didn't want this information coming out, because it showed too much of a connection with this virus, this COVID virus, going to Wuhan and Canada and the Liberals, everything else. It didn't look very good, and their polling numbers were looking good. So they decided to do something that they said, oh no, we won't do this. We're not going to take advantage of a national emergency COVID. to call an election. But what did they do? Well, they called an election, 2021. And that kind of closed the books to these procurement of documents. Madam Speaker, there's philosophical razors. That's a term I wasn't familiar with until I looked it up this morning. And in philosophy, a razor, it's not something you shave with, is a principle or a rule of thumb that allows one to eliminate or shave off unlikely expectations for an occurrence. So the one that actually I believe someone quoted here today during question period was Hanlon's razor, after Robert J. Hanlon, who said, "Never attribute to malice which can be adequately explained by stupidity or incompetence." And let's just say that the fiscal management of the Liberals is not a strong suit for them. I'd like to mention, quote a couple of razors, economic razors of our Prime Minister and the Liberals. Here's one. Take this to the bank. Don't. Budgets balance themselves. And that is the way that the Liberals have run this country. This is a quote from the Prime Minister. You know, they just balance themselves. They don't just balance themselves. It takes a lot of work, sacrifice, and attention. And that is something that we see from the Liberals, supported by the NDP, is inattention and fiscal imprudence, which is dragging our nation down. And then one that the Prime Minister said a week or two ago: let the bankers worry about the economy. We're focused on Canadians. Well, Madam Speaker, when you make stupid economic decisions, when there's no fiscal restraint, then things spiral out of control. And who pays the price? Canadians, by higher interest rates, by increased mortgage payments, by the cost of living. And that is what we're seeing that is being felt on the streets and in homes across Canada. We've seen also the per capita income in Canada has been stagnant since they've been in power, since 2015. New York Times said that Canada used to have the at the time it was quoted, that Canada has the world's richest middle class. This is in 2015. Wonder who was in power at that time. It's called the Conservatives under Harper. That is not the case. We are declining year after year. Our standard of living is far in comparison to much of the world. We were up one of the top 6 for many years, or for decades. Now I don't know, we're approaching number 30. And that's after this Prime Minister has lost control of spending. A few weeks ago, the Parliamentary Budget Officer reported that the deficit will be $7 billion higher than the Liberal government's own $40 billion spending cap for this year alone. Like, they can't control 1 year, let alone, it's just not in them, Madam Speaker. They just don't know how, it seems. They're not serious. It's unserious government. The Liberals inherited a surplus budget under the Conservatives. And I will say also that the Conservatives inherited a surplus budget under the previous Prime Minister, Paul Martin, with the Liberals. You know, that was a different party. I was going door to door on the weekend in I think it's the latest, Fort Langley, Cloverdale, riding for a by-election, and I was talking to people that have been Liberals, and they're telling me they're just shaking their heads. They're shaking their heads. They said, well, under Martin, under others, I supported them, but these guys, it's a clown show. It's not just a clown show, it's disaster. It's a disaster, Madam Speaker. And they're supported. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the NDP, so it rests on the NDP. And they promised in 2015, there'll be a $10 billion deficit, and then we'll be okay after that. Well, that hasn't been the case at all. None of those years. And then we have a quote from the finance minister. You know, two peas in a pod, Madam Speaker, called Canada's current state of Canada as a vibe session. This isn't, it sounds like, I don't know, disco days, I don't know. Vibe session. No, this is economics, that's her. And she says, what she says, quote, that Canadians just aren't feeling that good, which has caused them to slow down their spending, thereby causing vibe session. It's basically what she's saying. It's an insult. She's insulting, conceding. She says, it's all in your head. It isn't real, Madam Speaker. And that's why that Canadians are just not in, they don't understand reality. Well, it's the finance minister, it's the prime minister, it's the Liberal government backed by the NDP that just shows how clearly ignorant they are about where Canadians are at and what their policies have dragged our nation to. And, Madam Speaker, I had much more I wanted to talk about as far as this topic, and I will say the NDP. Now, we wouldn't even have this opportunity to debate if the NDP voted along with the Liberals. Now, the thing is, they're not, which is kind of a little bit surprising. Maybe not, maybe yes, but they have to show a little bit of a separation with the Liberals, because the Liberals, if anybody looks at polling for the past year and a half, or even sneaks a peek, it isn't going that great for the Liberals. And I know it's only a snapshot, but there's been lots of snapshots. It's been more like a movie for the past year and a half. And the NDP they say they're not supporting the Liberals, but they vote with them every time after. But not with you. They got to show a little bit of separation. Oh, we are different than the Liberals. Look, we're allowing this debate to continue. Well, Madam Speaker, I will say they've missed 35 spots of being able to speak. They put 6 speakers. This is an opportunity to be able to share what's on your heart. And there's a lot of flexibility. As far as Conservatives, we don't agree with the agenda of the Liberals, what they're supporting, and so we're quite happy to discuss this. We'd much rather have a carbon tax election today. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
And appreciate my colleague's intervention, especially since he ran for Speaker in this place as well, too. But I think it's really important to talk a little bit about the Canada-China Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement that his former leader, Stephen Harper, signed with the Communist Chinese regime. And, Madam Speaker, this cozy Conservative Communist coalition has actually led to a 31-year deal agreement where Stephen Harper went over to China, into Beijing, and watched all the goose-stepping and actually celebrated the agreement. And there's currently Conservative members that have been in this chamber today and also sit in that party that are on the press releases or on the contribution agreements that were participating as Communist China was allowed to buy up Canadian companies like Nexen and others. And when we were selling Canadian natural resources because the Liberals didn't want Petro-Canada to exist, we sold it off under Paul Martin. We were then putting the Canadian natural resources for sale to Communist China. So my question to the member is, how does he distance himself from Stephen Harper, or will he apologize for Stephen Harper going over to Beijing and selling Canada out to the communists because there's a cozy relationship between these Conservatives and Communist China?
The Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I find the member, I believe the NDP member's comments quite interesting. For one thing, he talks about natural resources. And this is a party that stymies, along with the Liberals, all development of natural resources. Whether it be oil and gas, agriculture, or fishing, everywhere you see it, you see the tentacles of the leftist, socialist, interventionist, parties trying to just choke the working Canadian. And I hear it all over the place. People that used to support the NDP, they said that they don't support our jobs. They support their woke interests right there, and the blue collar people are leaving the NDP, You mean you'd think with the polling of the NDP or the Liberals going down that the NDP would boost up, but it's not the case because they're Canadians are see them one and the same.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Speaker, and I noticed my colleague didn't answer that question with regards to Stephen Harper and him going to Beijing again and selling Canada out. That agreement is in place to this day, and he sits with colleagues that are very close to him that celebrated that agreement that puts and binds us for 31 years. And New Democrats actually supported Petro-Canada and keeping Petro-Canada, which was sold off at a loss by Paul Martin at that time. I was here in the chamber when we tried to stop him from doing it. He wouldn't. And what Stephen Harper did is he doubled down on selling Canadian natural resources, even trying to build pipelines out there to ship our oil and natural resources to communist China for their benefit. And they have not reconciled that piece of history, which is germane to today. So again, I ask, why does he not do anything, or at least apologize when Stephen Harper went over to Beijing and celebrated the communist regime goose-stepping all over Canadians and making sure that we're going to actually put our future at risk with this agreement that's signed that's in print today? Does the member not even have a sense of dignity for Canada? And especially when his members here come in this chamber and complain about communist China, and they complain about the Prime Minister's comments about communist China, and at the same time, their Prime Minister opened the door.
The Honourable Member for Peak Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I find this member's comments to be quite ignorant, to be using things like goose-stepping. So, yeah, no, we have to keep in mind also, and I was not a member in this House at the time. I was actually in the provincial government in British Columbia. But that China, developing relationships and trade is important. We have a lot of trade right there, but I know myself, even in the provincial legislature, warning my colleagues, saying, listen, we can't get too joined at the hip with the communist regime, recognizing who they are. So think of Canada's first interests. Canada first. Unlike the Liberals, NDP, where right now we are seeing Trump bring up a 25% tariff and against Canada. We need to have Canada first policies that, from strength, and we're suffering the consequence of poor governance, whether it be in drugs, whether it be in immigration, whether it be in resource development, every respect, and also in the mocking that they've had towards the current, the president to be in this party. I think that's been very harmful for our relationships for Canadians, because most of our exports go to the States.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Well, since we're not even talking about the motion now, because the last few exchanges and the member's speech was nothing to do with this issue, perhaps I'll go off topic too, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if the member can provide his thoughts on the fact that the member from Calgary Nose Hill is implicated in foreign interference, and it's possible, it's certainly alleged, that she was influenced to abandon Patrick Brown's campaign for leadership back in 2022, a leadership campaign that ultimately led to the election of the leader of the current Conservative Party. Is he concerned at all, like many Canadians are, that foreign diplomats would approach a member of Parliament and try to influence their support for a candidate? Simple yes or no. Is he concerned about that?
The Honourable Member for Pick Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Madam Speaker, we have been very clear that we want all the names to be released. We're not trying to hide anything. Just release the names. We're not afraid of anything being released. So we're asking the Liberals to release all the names. We believe in transparency. So we'd like to see some transparency with who are the members of Parliament, who are the senators, that, bring it out. We want to see that. That's important. Just like in this motion, going back to the motion, that we want to see the truth. I think the truth is important. We need to shine some light on the truth, and that's the only way that we can see things improve and changes. Thank you.
Comments? The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And back to the nature of the debate of what we're actually talking about here today in his speech. What does he think the government is trying to hide in this $400 million scandal that we're talking about today, where they refuse to produce the documents? Is he speculating at all about what companies are involved here and how much money extra beyond $400 million this government has siphoned off to their friends?
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and appreciate the question. I had about 20 pages, and I got to page 6, so I certainly wanted to discuss about the issues of money being siphoned out as far as corruption. That's not a word I use lightly, but I think that we have time after time after time, whether it be with the Green Slush Fund, where we see liberal insiders, hundreds of millions of dollars out of an $800 million fund, how so much of that was, the vast majority, 82%, was going to insiders and companies that should never have gone to, whether it be the ArriveCan scam, which should have cost maybe $250,000, whether it be We Charity, whether it be so many different things. Madam Speaker, I'd love the opportunity to have more questions.
The honourable Deputy House Leader.
So in response to my question, the member said that he wants to know who the 11 implicated members of Parliament are. Well, I would suggest to him that one very well might be the member from Calgary Nose Hill. Unless the RCMP or CSIS wasn't even aware that that was going on, she could even be the 12th. I don't know. So does this member have any insight into whether or not she indeed was one of the 11 that he speaks of?
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And like I won't just repeat myself, just release all the information. That's important. And going back to the topic right here, as far as corruption, we have another Liberal minister, former Liberal minister, that was received $120 million in contracts, and it was under a so-called Indigenous company, and he was claimed to be Indigenous, which he is not, and it's just a scam. The more you kick the tires, the more you look, the more the rot goes. And Canada needs a new government, and soon.